As a genre, survival horror has stuck with me for about as long as I can remember. I think the very first game I played was Dead Space. I want to say that was the first game I played as a part of the genre, and even though that game gave me nightmares, it stuck with me, or at least the challenge of it stuck with me. Not too long ago, a coworker of mine mentioned that I tend to play a lot of survival horror games on the channel. And not just him, but several of my friends. I say several, but I really don't have that many. Please be my friend. No. I'm not going to use that joke. Regardless, I have been told by various people, friends and coworkers alike, that I tend to play a lot of survival horror games. And when I try to explain why to them, they're not confrontational about it or anything like that. But I feel the need to explain why. Not out of defense, but because I'm genuinely curious myself. What is it about the genre that I really like that I keep coming back to? Sure, it could be the fact that I like to be scared sometimes, but I could watch a scary movie and probably scratch that itch, right? I'm not too sure about that, to be completely honest. One of the things that draw me to survival horror that I can think of off the top of my head is the feeling of vulnerability. Now, survival games in general get that message across, and they do scratch my itch, but just not as well as survival horror can. The horror part is important to me because horror, normally, to do horror right, in my opinion, you have to make the main character, be it me in the shoes of the main character, or if I'm watching a movie, the main character themselves have to be vulnerable, they have to be weak. I have to feel like they can be killed, or worse, because there are worse things in a lot of horror films and games. I feel like there needs to be a vulnerability to it. Survival horror as a genre in video games tends to get that message across to me. I love the feeling of scrambling for ammo or scrambling for what weapon's most effective here, what weapon's effective there. Like in Dead Space, there are times that I can remember where I have my favorite guns in Dead Space. I love the plasma cutter, but sometimes the line gun is best for crowd control. But for precision accuracy, I'm gonna need the plasma cutter. And while that's just one example, it's something that carries over into a lot of horror games that I tend to play. I like the feeling of vulnerability, and I like resource management. I like having to pick and choose what is needed at the moment. What do I need now versus what am I gonna need later? I like feeling overwhelmed. And on top of that, story-wise, horror just has a lot of interesting tales to tell. You know? I can't get the kind of stories that I would get in your Silent Hills, your Resident Evils, DreadOut, various other horror games, survival or not, at this point. I can't get those kinds of stories anywhere else because most of the time publishers don't want to, push that kind of game forward, because it's not going to sell with the masses versus the easier to digest stories. Now, I'm not saying the stories that are easier to digest are necessarily bad, it's just that 9 times out of 10, unless it's around Halloween, most people aren't really playing horror games like that. They're not really the in thing. They've definitely rose to popularity a lot more recently, but they're not the key moneymaker, So survival horror typically takes a back seat. Where the mainstream drops it, where the AAA industry drops it, the indie scene picks it up. And let me tell you, the indie scene does a really good job of bringing horror into a bunch of different forms that I wouldn't expect to see in any other place. From survival horror to Danganronpa's Psychopop, even though I can't really call Spike Chunsoft, I've never had to say their name out loud. I can't really call them indie, but to my point, that's a form of horror that I never thought I'd see. And there's something about it that just entices me. So I guess my point for making this video is not only to explain why I really enjoy survival horror as a genre, but also to try and explain why I feel like everyone should give a survival horror game a shot. I love having power fantasies like I do in games like Warframe, or games that make me feel really strong or really powerful, but in games like Bloodborne, where I can feel powerful but still feel weak. It's great. I love that challenge, that dynamic. So even when I'm getting stronger, even if in Resident Evil, for example, in the Resident Evil Remake Remaster of the remake, you get my point. Even in there, when I get a shotgun, I'm like, oh heck yeah, I'm about to kick some butt. But now you're introducing hunters, and these things can practically one-shot me if I'm not careful. For each upgrade I get in survival horror games, typically, there's always an enemy to one-up that thing. Which doesn't make the item I have useless, but it basically takes me down from my high. It makes me play defensively and think more strategically, versus just running through enemy upon enemy upon enemy upon enemy, which is why I thought Dead Space 3, for example, kind of lacked for me. It wasn't a bad game by any means, but in terms of a horror game, I could just mow down the necromorphs that I'm supposed to be, being defensive with most of the time. All in all, I would say that if you're a fan of survival horror, then obviously you know what I'm talking about. But if you're not a fan of survival horror, but you're looking for some challenging experiences, something that really gets your blood flowing, I would say give some survival horror games a shot. Play a Resident Evil game, preferably any of the ones up to 4. I might still count 4 to an extent, as it is technically survival horror, but it just leans a lot more on the action side. But I'd also recommend, Resident Evil 7 counts, Evil Within 2, Silent Hill 1 through 4. I can't speak for any ones after that because I'm still playing through 2. I'm kind of playing them a little out of order, to be completely honest. I played 3 and 4, but 1 and 2 I only really watched on YouTube. I want to get them and play them myself. I have 2 with me actually, so I'm still playing through that. I recommend Dead Space 1 and 2. I've recommended DreadOut before, even though DreadOut is not a game I would necessarily count as survival horror. That's one of those games I would say, no, that's just straight up horror. Your survival is just a matter of you not getting too close to the threat. But all in all, to keep myself from rambling, because really this video is just a ramble video for the most part, I love survival horror because it's challenging. I can't find those kinds of stories anywhere else, and a lot of times it's those darker tales that stick with me the longest. It's that grit that I really like. That said, sometimes it can be the flip side too, where the horror can actually be more disturbing than scary, and in my opinion there is a difference. Like how you would see it in Danganronpa, but I can talk about Danganronpa some other time. That's a whole other beast to tackle. The main reason why I made this video for the most part is because I wanted a different kind of video for the channel, just to get me used to talking a bit more often, casually, because otherwise when I'm talking on the channel, I'm either talking in a review or I'm talking in a Let's Play. And the problem is, in a Let's Play, I'm not trying to talk off the cuff too much, but at the same time in a review it's too restricted, so I can't really go off the cuff like that, and this was just on my mind. I tried scripting it out for me to really get my thoughts on the page, but it didn't come across as genuine, so I really went off script here just to see what really came to mind with this, because recently I've been really wanting to talk about survival horror to someone. So now you know what appeals to me when it comes to survival horror. I love a great challenge, and I can really find that challenge in survival horror. I can hear and experience really great stories, and on top of that, I like being scared sometimes. But the first two former reasons, are the main reasons I enjoy survival horror. I can find those things, those pieces in other genres, but typically when they're combined like that, along with fear, which by the way is also a really great first-person shooter. Fear is a great game. If you can find it, play it. It's on Steam. Buy it. That's my quick review on Fear. But you know all that now. Now I'm curious. what is it about survival horror as a genre that you guys really like, that really appeals to you? Because these may be my main 3 reasons, but they're not my only reasons. They're just the first 3 that really come to mind. And for those of you who aren't a fan of survival horror, just out of curiosity, why not? And if you wanted to get into it, then tell me what survival horror would need that would basically let you want to experience it. If you really get the drift of that question. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm TUSDarryl, and I hope you've enjoyed your stay.